When you think all is forsaken.
Listen for hope, as all is not forsaken. You need never feel broken inside.
Sometimes darkness can show you the light. A king's wisdom.
Leaping forward. As he had told the king, Daemon returned within a week's time and handed over the stepstones to Viserys, who welcomed him back with open arms.
Brothers reconciled, reformed their bonds as family and begun anew. A feast was thrown in celebration for the reunion. Otto kissed ass the entire time naturally, then again that was the type of man he was, but he certainly wasn't hiding his annoyance with Daemon, which actually proved a welcome sight.
A month later, a grand wedding was to take place, and would be a spectacle like no other. The beloved prince, the Dreadbringer, he who was loved by dragons, conqueror of the Stepstones, the Nightbringer, was finally getting married.
The sun sulked low in the sky over King's Landing. Like a recalcitrant child not quite yet ready to rise, the great fiery orb peeked over the horizon with great hesitation and reluctance, as though it weren't keen to bring on the dawn of a new day. One might even be forgiven for thinking it melancholy. After all, today would prove to be a day among days. A date that, for better or worse, would forever live on in the hearts and minds of the people. Bards would sing songs of this day, and many a scholar would inevitably tell their own tales in the years hereafter as opinion and rumor warped the story, but here, today, this moment would live forever. When one looked back and asked how it all began, all would say here.
It started with the dawn. Here, in the wee hours before waking, the quiet before the storm if you would, all lay still. Well, nearly all. Though even the lowliest of beggars were just only now beginning to stir from their beds, the sky was already teeming with life. One had but to gaze up at the Red Keep to see the dragons wheeling overhead. Caraxes, Maels, and Vermithor, each impossible to miss as they circled and banked overhead, calling to one another. On occasion one would make a dive for the water, snatching up an unlucky fish or gull who dared too close. As though spurred from its stupor by their cries, the sun finally rose, and with it marked the day of the prince's wedding. It was to be a day of celebration, a union that would unite the realm in joy. All told, it had proven a massive undertaking, planning such an event with little more than a couple weeks to spare. Thankfully, those handed the task proved themselves worthy of it, and prepared a grand event the like of which none could imagine. Nearly all the nobles were invited to attend, and more than a few peasant folk on the prince's behalf. This didn't sit nearly so well with the upper class, the latter of which were told to suck it up, or sod off. Regardless, the wedding, and the festivities that followed, would commence soon. Indeed, the whole of Westeros itself seemed to wait with bated breath. Many years later, when asked about her wedding, Alicent would sum it up in one word: fairy tale. It had been a beautiful spring day. The sky was clear blue, and the sun was shining. The birds were chirping. And while Alicent normally didn't pay attention to such things, trees were in full bloom. She noticed this because a portion of their wedding would be held outdoors.
They had no other option. The guest list was simply too long. Of course they had to invite the Warden of the North, South, East and West alongside their heirs to the Union, their family members, their bodyguards, their lesser lords, and there were travelers who had come from far and wide to gaze at the spectacle. Alicent wasn't sure how many guests they had attended, but she was sure that they numbered in the hundreds, if not the thousands. The city streets were jam-packed full of people hoping to catch a glimpse of the groom and bride.
There was just one problem. She should wear her hair up. Rhaenyra snapped at Rhaenys in the dressing room. Alicent was currently in her dressing room with her bridesmaids. So very many.
She supposed it made sense in theory. This was her special day, and for once, all grudges had been set aside, but did there have to be quite so many? She should wear it down. Rhaenys argued with her cousin niece.
I'm wearing it down, Alicent sighed as she tried her best not to groan.
But Alicent, Rhaenyra protested. Naruto would just undo whatever design you put my hair into anyway. She shrugged as if that settled the matter.
Puzzled look was her reward. Why would he do that?
It'll give him something to hold onto as they screw like rabbits. Rhaenys rolled her eyes, helping adjust her dress. I suppose he's the sort that likes to pull on a woman's hair. Alicent quietly reveled in the surprised expression Rhaenyra wore. Indeed, her eyes were almost comically wide. Really, I always pictured Naruto as, you know, gentle and romantic.
Not so those words.
She fixed her with a steely look. Why are you thinking such things about my husband? To her credit, Rhaenyra recovered quickly. But she'd seen it. A flicker in her facade. A glimpse at what lay beneath. I didn't mean anything by it, Alicent. I would never do that to you. The young woman puts her hands up in a defensive gesture. Surely you believe me. She wasn't quite sure she did, so she pretended to play along. I didn't mean to sound offensive, Rhaenyra. I was merely asking out of curiosity. I wouldn't test that theory. Rhaenys muttered.
Veil or no veil? Rhaenyra asked quickly, wishing to move on. Veil. My mother had one. Alicent tilted her head as she considered the question.
Very well, a veil it was. Naruto was panicking.
Part of him wanted to bolt, to quit King's Landing and put all of this nonsense behind him. The other, well, he owed that more to the whispers than any rational thought. Still, he knew his duty, and would do it, no matter how much the voices might want or wish otherwise. He'd need to go on a good purge soon to get it out of his system, else he risked going berserk and hurting those he held most dear. In short order, they were bundled into a carriage and escorted to the sept.
The ride itself proved remarkably uneventful, for none dared to challenge them. If assassins were lurking hereabouts, they hadn't decided to move against the crown. Yet, Naruto almost wished they had. Slaughtering their ilk would have been a welcome reprieve to what he faced. Instead, he emerged from the carriage not to a horde of enemies as he'd expected, but to a crowd of well-wishers.
Lord Naruto. Lord! Here!
Endless supplications assaulted them as they reached the stairs, and the prince found himself forced to fend them off with promises of aid and the like. Cole was forced to wade through the crowd ahead of them, gently but firmly ushering the populace aside to make way for them both.
It felt like hours before he finally made it to the sept.
From there, time passed in a blur for Naruto. Viserys was there in the crowd with his Kingsguard, observing the proceedings with a keen eye, alert for any and all manner of disruption. Daemon and Naruto turned to one another, eyes met, and father and son shared a nod. Nothing more, nothing less. He marched past his lord father without so much as a second thought and took his place before the High Septon. Minutes passed, then hours as the sept slowly swelled with people, commoner and noble alike.
All the while Naruto chafed at the waiting. Blasted sept. Blasted wedding. Blasted honor and duty. Even so, he briefly blinked when he beheld the massive set of food being brought in by a handful of servants. The setup was enough to feed damn near all of the realm for a week. It was huge. Weren't they going a bit overboard? Then he saw the crowd. Scratch that. Actually, that amount was just the right size.
Are you nervous? Lord Curlies asked. You idiot, what's he got to be nervous about? He's been sleeping with her for months already. His cousin Laner rolled his eyes.
Not really. Mostly I just want to see her in her dress and then get out of here so I can take it off. Naruto smiled cheerfully.
That's my boy, I taught you well. Daemon patted his back proudly. Indeed you did, Naruto smiled, seeing as the sheer amount of food was an expensive undertaking of gathering. And Otto, thanks for helping us with the feast. You did wonderful work. No problem, my prince. Our work was only a drop in the pond compared to the small folk pitching in their own assistance. The hand shrugged at him.
False flattery amidst false flattery. Perpetuate the ruse? For now. Viserys clapped his hands. Come, everyone to your places. We can't very well ruin such a tremendous day for him.
The men headed to their positions. Naruto waited at the end of the aisle. Thousands of eyes were on him.
A few minutes later, he could see flowers both from the various blossoms everywhere, a virtual rainbow of floral arrangements. The seats were covered in red satin and golden trimming. The cake had to be at least 10 feet tall. And then... wow!
Alicent emerged from the gladdened throng and Naruto briefly forgot how to breathe. She wore a long blue-green lace veil that trailed about 2 feet after her. Her gown had matching lacy intricate see-through sleeves, with a very revealing neckline, partially opened with a diamond-shaped opening in the back. The rest of the top was made out of a darker colored satin and caressed her curves like a lover would. The bottom of her gown was flowing and made out of pure silk. He couldn't see her feet, but he assumed they wore a matching pair of shoes tailored for her gown. Her long crimson locks contrast stunningly against the gown.
Naruto had always envied her grace. She was like an apex predator that had one day decided to take human form. All deadly, sensual grace. It made for quite a dramatic walk down the aisle.
You look beautiful. He smiled when she reached him and he took her hand in return. You don't look so bad yourself. She laced their fingers together. And so the Septon began. We are gathered here today, in the eyes of the Septon and the glory of the Seven, in order to witness the union of Crown Prince, Naruto Targaryen and Alicent Hightower. Should anyone have any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace. Thankfully, the crowd remained silent. The priest smiles while he slowly takes the time to look at the crowd and determines that everyone is ready.
The High Septon droned on for what seemed like an eternity, espousing the values of their seven, and their mercy, and oh, for fuck's sake! Finally, he could stand no more. Shut your hole and get on with it.
Feathers ruffled, the Septon recoiled, but did as he was bid. As you wish, my lord.
Naruto needed no further inclination. Finally! It seems the couple would like to recite their vows. Lord Naruto, would you like to go first? He asks the prince.
Alicent, when we were children, we often got ourselves into trouble for interfering with the council with our meticulous arguments and fights. He began and the crowd snickered at that, Viserys nodding his head in sage agreement. But that was only because that was the only way I knew how to get your attention. I guess, deep down I always knew that you were the one I wanted. Those childish arguments and spats were some of my fondest memories, and I know that we might have many more in the years to come. I love you and I'm not letting you go as long as I draw breath. He finishes. Naruto, you were my first everything. My first friend, my first confidant, and my only love. I tried so hard to push you away when we were little, but you kept coming after me. You never gave up on me. I'm so glad that you didn't. You have no idea how happy it makes me each day to be around you, and to dream of the nights when I will fall asleep in your arms and for your face to be the first thing I see in the morning. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. She smiled upon finishing. In the crowd, a sniffling sound filled the air.
Daemon, are you crying? Viserys asks. No. It's just something in my eye, Daemon hissed out.
Viserys pats his brother on the back reassuringly. It's all right, brother. I always cry at weddings myself. The power of love is just so beautiful. He promptly began bawling.
Several people had turned to them when they had spoken, and remained silent throughout the whole ordeal. Alicent didn't say anything, only trying to suppress her humor at the sight of the king acting so childish.
That's disturbing, Naruto muttered. It could be worse, Alicent silently agreed. Well yes, shall we continue? The Septon asked, drawing a nod from each of them, to which the couple nodded.
The Sep's reaction proved decidedly muted to that, but he paid them no heed.
Fuck them, pretentious pricks. Drawing a ribbon from his voluminous sleeve, the disgruntled Septon took one of their hands each and bound them together. Let it be known that Alicent of the House Hightower, and Naruto of the House Targaryen are one heart and flesh, one soul, the man announced loudly. With a deep breath he added on, cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder.
Curses be he who would seek to tear them asunder, the crowd echoed after a pause. Naruto nearly bit the Septon's head off for that remark, but restrained himself. There was but one line he had left to endure. Then this would be done, and you may now cloak the bride and bring her under your protection. Remembering the custom such as it was, he allowed the priest to unbind the ribbon. Then he did as he was bade, wrapping his bride in a cloak of his own. Only then did he turn, and they with him, to face the crowd, holding their hands in his own. So,
this was how it felt to be married again. This complete feeling he had missed for so many years. It was a feeling he had missed, a freeing breath for sure.
As if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders.
My lord, you may now kiss your bride, the Septon finishesti. Naruto didn't have to be told twice. He lifts Alicent's veil and pulls her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that caused several audience members to gasp and cover their children's eyes. Alicent kisses back and squeaks in embarrassment when he pushes her against the altar. This forces Alicent to wrap her legs around his waist to keep her balance as he utterly possesses her mouth.
Looks like the honeymoon started early. Daemon coughed. Naruto, Alicent, there are children present, Otto exclaimed, sounding scandalized.
Well, there ain't no faking that kind of love. Rhaenys chortled silently to her husband. No, there is indeed no faking that. Lord Curlys clapped his hands, starting the remainder of the crowd in applauding for their union. And now life begins anew. Push, Alicent, the maester told the wailing redhead as she grit her teeth and pushed once more.
You bastard, you did this to me, she snarled in his face, only to cry out as another birthing spasm rocked her.
Cries of pain poured through the room as Alicent gave it her all to push the life she had created out of her womb, and cries filled the air as she succeeded in her quest to bring life to her child.
Finally!
A boy, it is a boy. The maester cried out happily, the babe's wails sounding through the chamber. Claps and jeers of happiness filled the room as the master held the babe aloft as handmaidens smiled at him and moved about to do their duties. Hand him here, hand me my son, Alicent said, holding her arms out.
Naruto smiled as he took the babe after cutting the cord and washing him, and swaddling him properly. Naruto knelt next to his wife and smiled. We did good. What shall we name him? I was thinking, Viserys, after the king in his honor. He chuckled. He'd get a laugh out of that one, but are you sure not something else?
Alicent nodded. I am as sure as the sun and moon. She smiled at him.
Their stories would go down in history. She just knew it. Valerian sniffed.
Who was this small mewling creature and why was his partner offering it to him? Humans were strange. Say hello to my son, Valerian.
His partner's mate looked concerned. She needn't be. The black dread sniffed once and lay back down. Protect the child,